Jon, how are you asking for data from the show organizers that convinces them to share as much as possible with you? I think that's always a big one for event marketers, either timid to ask, getting pushback, and not knowing the proper paths and channels.
Being blunt.
What are the differentiators you are using for MQL versus SQLs? And are you making these leads as MQLs, SQLs on the show floor in the lead app? I like this question because I think it is, when is this stuff happening, right? Because it has to flow for the back half of the show. It's a great question for some.
You can have the best tools, the best lead retrieval system, but at the end of the day, it comes down to human behavior. If your booth staff is not doing it, they're not trained, they don't understand the importance, it's all going to fall apart anyway.
Fun show today. I have on Jon Wolff and Joe Federbush. Jon is the Senior Global Event Manager at Lenovo. Joe is the President of EVOLIO Marketing. Give everybody here, you're both famous. Let's go one by one. You first.
Hey, everyone. Joe Federbush, President of EVOLIO Marketing. EVOLIO, based in Chicago, formerly New York. So could talk a lot about pizza, but two very different styles of pizza, actually. But anyway, we do event measurement, strategy, and help companies really get the best they can, deliver the best experiences, return on investment, return on experience, return on emotion, all the KPIs and metrics we need to keep our programs funded and successful.
I love, Joe, I love you saying to keep these programs funded. I think that's such a pivotal piece there. Jon, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. Jon Wolff, Senior Events Manager for Lenovo. Business unit that I represent is our Services and Solutions unit. So we're all the services that are attached with the hardware. So my job is really trying to create excitement from something that's intangible, right? So we have tried to, over the last 3 years, develop this portfolio, this measurement. Again, we're not just the executioners. Yes, we need to do that, but we're focused on being event marketers and being strategists, right? And a lot of what we've done in partnership with Joe is really take a step back and look at the data and let the data speak to what drives the future of the business.
Nice. Just clarity as we're walking through this for everybody. Jon is on the brand side, right? Where they are executing and deploying capital towards events, looking to drive results, right? Joe, you agency, supplier, partner, vendor, you name it, right? That's what Joe is. So guys, let's start with kind of story, right? In the sense of tell me, and Jon, this is probably a question for you, which is what brought you two working together? Jon, so what kind of got this going? Was there a conversation? Was there a problem that was looking to be solved? But what got the wheels going here?
So I'll start with the silver lining here is agency collaboration, right? That's the theme of the conversation, how we got here. Story goes back to 2018. Joe knows this. I was actually attending his workshop on ROI. I was at that point 5 years into doing events. Now it's 14 years. It was a conversation that I attended when we worked with our agency partner on an event in NRF was the event. I basically said I want to have a way to measure not only what we're doing in the booth, but post-event. Help me figure out who those other people are. And right, that's how, by attending Joe's event, brought Joe in to really help us measure and use an event to really be the catalyst for our portfolio analysis. That's how we got together. So agency collaboration, you never know in what we do who you're going to run into. And then Joe and I have been working ever since then, really taking that from beta testing, let's see if it works, to let's revamp our portfolio analysis and really lead with KPIs and objectives to measure what we're doing.
Great. Either of yours perspective, was there a particular problem or something, either Jon that you were trying to solve, or maybe Joe that you encountered through discussion? Was there anything, I get from a macro level, Jon, what you're saying from measuring in the booth to post-show as well, but was there anything specific that maybe you were trying to solve, or Joe that you were trying to help solve?
You want to take that, Joe?
Yeah, sure. It was interesting with the approach, starting to work with Jon and his team is, as Jon mentioned, he's in a business unit within Lenovo that's like lesser known, that's an intangible service and solution versus the hardware that everyone knows, Lenovo's laptops and servers and things like that. So what we did was really took a strategic approach, reverse engineered the whole process. Instead of saying, hey, let's just go in and start measuring right away, What we did was we literally spoke with 15 Lenovo, SSG, and other stakeholders globally to understand what are their issues, what are their challenges, how do they define success, and even how do they compete but collaborate within these different lines of businesses within Lenovo to tell that one Lenovo story versus being three or siloed business units. So in instances where they were exhibiting together all the business units versus just an event where it's just John's SSG business unit, really looking at, let's take a step back and say, let's define what the challenges are so we can develop the KPIs and the playbook to go and then start measuring. Not every company has the luxury to do that. You know, that cliche saying of building the plane while you're flying it. We did do that at the beginning. We did jump into measurement, but we said, okay, before we get too deep, let's make sure these are the KPIs and metrics that are going to be useful, they're going to be actionable, and that you can use to continuously improve your program.
Let's pause on that for a second, because I think it's a really great thing. We're talking about identifying issues, challenges, what success looks like, this idea of beginning with the end in mind, getting the full picture so that you can make these educated moves, right? And you can create strategic plans and craft KPIs and goals. So from either of you, give us a little bit of insight into what that process looked like, right? Because I understand talking with key stakeholders, but what are some questions people should be asking themselves internally? What are the openers? What are those discussions? Give us some depth on those discussions would be great.
Yeah, so I would say what Joe hinted at, it was, what does success look like? We have our input, but what success looks like from a sales perspective, marketing perspective, business perspective is different, right? Sales truly only cares about leads and pipeline, whereas the brand may care about the net promoter score, impressions, whereas the company may be, okay, are we moving the needle? And so that's where we started with that high level question, and we got tactical as far as, okay, what does that success look like when it comes to your function, other business groups, so that we could then quantify, okay, we're going to have 5 objectives that we map out for each event. We might not do all 5. It might be only 2, but at least have the framework, what's important. And as we go to the events, okay, it's going to be thought leadership. We don't want to focus on lead generation. We're more about influencing the brand. Whereas we might do an event that's more demand generation, less thought leadership. So we care more about the sales opportunities, leads there. So that was the overarching starting point. Then we got down to, okay, here's analyzing the feedback. That gave us then a benchmark to say, okay, when we evaluate events or when we decide, hey, this is underperforming, here's then that framework that we can revert back to so that we're leading with data. Again, we're in a crawl, walk, run. We're more on that run now at this point. We're more now, hey, we're going to lead with the data. If things are underperforming, gone is the day of acting with feeling. We're leading data as our driving force and function.
I love that. John, just a thought on that, because I've thought about this a bunch. I wrote the other day, I had a great conversation with a CMO that got on a call, and a huge kudos to the event marketer that kind of talked up the ladder to the CMO. And really what the whole discussion was about was that CMO wanted to know from me and my team, how can you help me with my go-to-market strategy? That was the discussion. And part of the things that got my wheels turning on this is what you just broke down, which is you have sales, you have marketing, you have the business in its entirety. Sales is judged one way, marketing is judged another way. The business initiatives are judged another way. So you get these conflicting ideas of what we're trying to accomplish because everybody needs their nugget, their piece to go prove either like attribution or, hey, we're doing a good job here. So from your side, from what I heard, and just to clarify, is essentially once you established what everybody needs, you were then saying, we can't do all of this every single time, but we can plug and play to where it's relevant. Mission critical by show, by event. I think that's I want to make sure I heard that because I think that's a massive point for people is that everybody has this issue where you have sales wants this, marketing wants that, the business and executive want this. So if you're able to do this pre-work that you and Joe did, you can now say, what's mission critical based on per event. You're not going to do everything all the time and not everybody's going to get their cake and eat it too. Is that about right?
Oh, 100%. And I think the conversation here we could expand on is really having that collaboration and partnership with sales. The event marketer can suggest the best event to be at, but the minute that we suggest it to our sellers and they say no, we're pushing a boulder uphill. We need to have that alignment fundamentally from the get-go so that when we do these events, when I go to my seller and say, here's your events for North America, I'm saying, I need you to be in the trenches with me. I need your help to drive meetings. I need your help to drive follow-up. This is how it's going to benefit you versus, oh, here's marketing coming with one more event that we have to do. So we're trying to treat it as mutually beneficial. Here's the outcomes that you get in driving your KPIs. Here's the outcomes that we get on our KPIs.
Yeah. What I love about that approach is I think at the end of the day, it's like this discussion that we're having about events. If events have to be this catalyst and this driver of a result that matters to sales and marketing, and really probably at the end of the day, that's really pipeline, right? It really is some form of a pipeline that's going into it. And I think that's the trend that I see across the board that
Yep.
at least I'm trying to prepare event marketers for is if you are just executing, you have to understand that, yeah, maybe that axe hasn't swung yet, but the axe will swing at some point in time, right? You have to be contributing and dialed into that go-to-market piece.
I had a conversation yesterday with one of our top leaders, and it was explain to me the events that we're cutting, explain to me how we're evaluating events. You're asking for an increase in budget, justify. And you know, I talked with Joe earlier on this. We're able to show that increase because of this process and rigor that we've established. We're able to show we're acting with data, and here's the evaluation that we've done with Joe that we're leading with. It's not just subjective. Here's the data points to quantify what we're doing.
Just for everyone that's listening, essentially, if you have any questions, put it in the Q&A. The Q&A is at the bottom of your screen, right? It's a little button, click it, type your question in there. We will definitely try to get to it as we move through this. And if you put it in the chat, like a lot of people do, Ish will find it and send it to me, so don't worry. Guys, tell me about once you've done this prep work and you're getting ready to say, okay, let's go deploy, collect data, and then make decisions. What kind of goals did you set? Any initial goals? Was there any sort of feeling as to this is what we need to try and accomplish and this is what we're shooting for right now? Anything specific?
With that portfolio optimization analysis approach that we did proactively, using formulas, contacting show organizers, doing your homework and due diligence about really truly understanding the audience was really one of the most critical and honestly time-consuming steps, because shows talk about, oh yeah, we've got 10,000 attendees and everyone's a decision maker, or this, that, and the other thing. But the reality is that it's all about how John defined his target. That's what's key. And how many of the people attending represent that target audience. So it goes beyond just decision makers or CIOs.
Yes.
Some events, it's only about CIOs, but other events that are more industry wide, for example, is his target audience? Yeah, of course, it's decision makers, things like that, but maybe they have to be from companies that are mid-sized to enterprise.
Yeah.
Maybe they have to be within certain industry sectors. So that kind of, sets the stage for, it's not about all the attendees, it's about the attendees that they care about the most. So that we literally we have formulas based on benchmarks to understand, okay, if X percent represents your target, you should attract X percent of them and engage with X percent of them. Yeah. So to set realistic targets in terms of you should leave a show with so many marketing and sales qualified leads versus just a bunch of badge scans. And I think even then more importantly, is looking at the whole point of this, talking about beyond the booth. What are the beyond the booth opportunities that each show offers and how they align with John's goals and objectives? As he mentioned, we may go to show A more for demand gen, lead gen, show B for more thought leadership, show C, networking is priority. So we looked at, now we've got booth size and booth space and number of targets and stuff like that. But then it gets to, okay, what are the sponsorship opportunities? If your goal is thought leadership at show A, you need your key stakeholders, influencers, subject matter experts to be speaking as well. Yep. And is that like the speaking because you're submitting papers or is a part of a sponsorship package, et cetera? So that kind of gets the ball rolling more beyond the booth in terms of setting realistic targets and expectations, which again leads to budgeting and of course, business outcomes.
One thing that I want to talk a little further about is because I talk about this all the time and I feel like I blab on it like a lunatic on the side of the road, is essentially when you're saying audience analysis research by these shows, I am constantly with what I'm posting, with what I'm talking about saying, do you really know who's at this show? And what I mean by that is not the persona, but walk me through, who do you want to talk to? What type of companies do they work at? Are they genuinely at the show? And are they on the floor? Are they off the floor? Are they flying in and out for meetings? Walk me through some of the details of what is relevant for someone that is saying, wow, that resonates with me. And I need to be doing a little bit of my own research or even just qualitative thinking as to, is my customer really here? Number one. And then
Right.
two, I think what you're alluding to when you do that analysis is, okay, now how do I tailor and cater everything to that individual and where they're at? So you just give us a little bit of detail. What should people be searching for, looking for, and asking?
Yeah, it all starts with, let's say you're looking for new shows to get into versus the existing shows you've been in. Obviously, start with whether you're Googling, more importantly, using AI nowadays, putting in some really good prompts to say, hey, I'm a strategic event manager. I'm looking for shows to participate in, both exhibiting and sponsorship. My target audience is this and this, really be very specific. Can you recommend which shows? Provide me a list of which shows I could go to, dates, locations, number of attendees. My competitors are X, Y, and Z. Are they also present at these shows? Whether it's one big long prompt or a series of prompts, AI really is magical with helping us do this these days versus Googling, or it's a combination of. You create that laundry list, then you start looking at it, refining it, looking, okay, we don't need to pursue these. These look hot. Now let's contact the show organizer and have a deep dive conversation with them. What's just your marketing fluff material or your exhibitor prospectus versus what can you do for me? And one of the other like nice tips is, if it's a show you really want to pursue, I always recommend exhibitors, sponsors, go to the attendee registration page and look at how the show organizer or association is registering attendees, because are those check boxes and choices, do they align with your audience? You could say, hey, show organizer, I see on your attendee registration page, you've got people, you have your industry, company size, decision maker, whatever the case is, because that's going to really create a finite target audience sample. Then to take it one step further, as I mentioned, hey, we're really looking to have meaningful connections, enhance relationships with customers and prospects that represent this job title, from this company size, from this industry, whatever the case may be. What kind of sponsorship opportunities can you offer me to build those direct connections? Or if it's thought leadership, sessions where I can really connect with those types of people in the audience from an educational standpoint, maybe complemented by a speaking standpoint versus networking. And then what are the drivers that are going to get people to our booth to get the demo, to see it in action? So it's not easy, but it's also not that complicated. It is very like methodical and it takes time.
And one thing I would say here is we should, as event professionals and marketers, be empowered to be doing this already. Like discussion today here shouldn't be the, oh, I'm not doing that now. I might not be doing that now, but I can be empowered to be having these conversations and asking these questions to the show organizer. That's part of our due diligence, to really unearth that data and don't feel as though I'm just acceptance of the status quo, right? There's been numerous times where I'm pushing back on the show organizers because it's a mutually beneficial relationship. If they're not providing the value or crystal clear communication and or information, I don't need to continue going back to that one. Case in point, there was an event Joe and I did in London. They promised us the best thing. We went forward. We had a great sponsorship. It was a good activation. But when we looked at the data, what they projected as far as our target audience being, let's say 25%, again, the numbers are just there. It was only 12. And I said, absolutely not. Pull it. We're not going again. So that all to say, you as event professionals and marketers should be empowered to be having these conversations and not feeling as though you don't have a voice.
Nice. I two things there. John, when you're okay, so you just told about the 25% running data and tracking to be able to see, okay, it's actually really only 12%, right? Is for getting people to think down the line a little bit. The way my brain views that is what percentage your relevant audience is at an event matters, right? And then the next layer that matters to it, to me, is Pablo always says unit economics of the situation, right?
Yep.
So if you're getting 12% and that ends up being like 100 people, I'm just using rough numbers. So I think the next thing, and this is more of the business conversation, is what is the average sale? What does a new project look like? What is the lifetime value of those people? Because essentially at 12% of a large event, that may boom for you. You may
Right.
only have to get one person to be added into pipeline to close, or two for whatever it may be. And I think that's the next layer of people thinking. You obviously have a good feel on those. So when you see 12, you're like, hey, no, this isn't going to work for us. I
Well,
got to
it's
be north of 20 per se.
yeah, and it might be 12% is good. I'm not saying arbitrarily. It depends. It's on a number of factors there, because it's, if you have, again, beyond the booth is, I always go back to this, it's the anchor point for the activation. It's not the focal point. So if you have presentations, if you have things outside of that, determines based off of your leads or the percentage of the value, how well or how poorly we did. For us, it was a number of things, being the target audience wasn't there based off of the booth scans, the presentation, that kind of made us reevaluate. So again, you only need one win opportunity for you to have a success at an event. It's just based off of what we found to be successful, not the end all be all.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to peg down below it for people, because I think for event marketers, they need to understand those next layers so that they know like how to quantify it or how to be asking questions upward. We have a question, and then we also have another question in the chat, but I'm kind of move them together because I think they go together. Lawrence asked in the Q&A, it says, if our main objective is lead generation, what KPIs should we track? Then Brittany asked, how do you measure retention and current customer impact at events? New business feels easy, since it can be as simple as leads, but how do you measure current customer impact and value in events? I'll let John and Joe go, but what I would start by saying on those two pieces is, one thing that I think is super important is people throw the word leads around so carelessly. I use, and again, you don't have to use this. I've coined it 100%. I'll fight somebody. I've coined this term, pipeline impact. Pipeline impact relates to, Brittany, what you're asking, which is customer retention, deal acceleration, all the stuff that's already going on, events touch into. And I think it's important to understand that when you go to an event, what is happening. You're not just meeting new people and adding them into your CRM and, oh, hey, we're going to work together, right? Like, you're seeing current customers, you're seeing people that are already in deals, you're seeing referral partners, you're seeing this laundry list, and they all go into being pipeline. So then back to the question for you guys, which is from Lawrence, is our main objective is lead generation. What KPIs should we track?
Yeah, I could take that. And John, you can even give examples of what you guys are doing. So if lead gen is your KPI, which is extremely common, obviously, first look at what are you doing to generate leads. So if you have any kind of multi-channel, omni-channel pre-show promotion and communications that you're doing, look at open rates, deliverability, things like that. That's basic marketing 101 type stuff. Don't do the things that aren't working, do the things that are working. For then when you get to the actual KPI perspective from lead gen, and I think to Matt's point, it's not just about leads, it's about the MQ marketing qualified leads, the MQLs and the SQLs, the sales qualified leads. So it's okay. We had 100 badge scans. Of those 100 badge scans, our staff qualified those people, answered BANT questions, buying, need, authority type questions, standard lead qualification questions, whether it's organically in conversation or literally asked because you have maybe brand ambassadors who are scanning badges and asking those questions, so that your leads can be rated. And you want to know, are these, then you feed it into your CRM, for example, to understand, at least from the SQL perspective, the sales qualified leads, where are they in the funnel? And this kind of connects with Brittany's question and point too. Where are they in the funnel? Are they, someone touched them 3 years ago and never talked to them again? Or do they already have proposals and they're closer to the closing stage? And again, Matt, to your point, the impact, are you moving the sales stage as a result of your SQLs,
Yes.
for example?
Yep.
Did it go from interested to wants a quote? Did it go from want a quote to close? And then you can contribute the investment in that event to that sale. Let's be realistic here, right? Just because you invested in an event, the deal closed, it probably didn't go from 0 to sold because of that one interaction. That would be amazing if it did. But so there's that side of it, is understanding where they are in the funnel, where they went as a result of their visit to the funnel. On the MQL side, the marketing qualified lead side, the KPI should really look at, okay, are these people being nurtured? And then are they moving again from that marketing funnel stage to, yeah, they clicked on an email, but didn't click on the link in the email, or maybe it's the 15th touch point because they've been to your webinar, they've downloaded product information, whatever. So the point is to really sum it up. Your KPI should be like, okay, did our number of badge scans, SQLs, how many are converting into the next sales stage, and obviously tracked over time. Whether your buying cycles are 3 days or 3 years, you really have to keep an eye on those things. And as John alluded to, you have to work closely with sales in order to get that information. 9 times out of 10, we see it's because you didn't ask for the information. That's why you're not getting it. If you're asking sales to say, hey, let's collaborate and track our leads, our SQLs, you're probably going to get some kind of reporting.
And John, would you think that just based on that, with all the information when you're taking leads in, having a good lead retrieval, having a good system for you're scanning a person, so whether they're a customer, they're a prospect, they're in the middle of a deal, that personalized information is what you need for afterwards, right? You have to have all that in there. Is that something that you all are doing?
It is, yeah. I think the lead unit is the tool, but what you do with it is more important. And what I think Jody said in the chat is campaign IDs.
Yeah.
The lead unit is the device, but there's qualifying questions that you need in there that are reflective of your business, and stepping back, a campaign ID, lead source code, whatever, that's the fundamental, how the sausage is made, how you report back on what's important. And then for us, you made a point, Matt, leads are arbitrary. How do you qualify a lead? Is it a true lead or is it a nurture contact? Because you went to an event and got 500 leads, but of those, maybe only 80 of them are actually market qualified leads. The rest we're going to add to nurture campaigns. I think comments in there about what's hot, what's cold, having that in your pre-planning process with, okay, we're going to do this event. We have these 4 activations. By activations, this is how we're qualifying it. If it's warm, if it's cold, here's the nurture campaign that's going to happen afterwards once the event's over. If it's hot, right into whatever your CRM tool is, and then here's that ongoing conversation with sales after.
I got a few questions. I want to keep carving through them because I want to use like the last 10, 15 minutes or so to hit on like what you guys uncovered and fill the end of the story. But I want, John, how are you asking for data from the show organizers that convinces them to share as much as possible with you? I think that's always a big one for event marketers, either timid to ask, getting pushback, and not knowing the proper paths and channels. It's a great question.
Being blunt, we want to come to your event. No, but we want to come to your event. Yes, we need to have the sponsorship call about here's the gold, silver bonds package that you have, but can you give me some historic year-over-year data? Can we break down the number of audiences? Is that inclusive of exhibitors, exclusive of exhibitors? What's the target audience? And some show organizers have gotten good with including that on the website, so we can try to unearth that. But again, that goes back to what success looks like. If it's thought leadership, then are my top companies there? Are the audiences based off my target audience there? So having that fundamental framework allows them to have that conversation. And I'm not saying be rude, but just have an open conversation where you're trying to make sure you get the information that keeps you informed.
John, I love that point because I love the fact that if we are looking at events as a sales and marketing channel, as a go-to-market contributor, you have to ask questions that way. We're not there just to show up, right? And events, honestly, if you're looking at trade shows and third-party conferences, their biggest value is the congregating and the gathering. So they need to deliver information on that congregating and gathering because that's what they're delivering to you.
And to take it a step further, if you build that rapport with the show organizers, then that rapport then becomes, I don't see what you have, what's in your sponsorship package doesn't meet my current needs. Can we create a new activation? That's what we did. We had an event in Barcelona where I wanted to do a reception, targeting CIOs only. I didn't see that as part of the package. I went to my account executive and said, hey, I'm happy with this, but I think this is what we can do to expand it. So this is where you're elevating yourself as an event marketer from just executioner to then strategist.
And if you can deliver value to their customer, which to a degree is the attendee as well, I think
Yep.
they should be game for it, right? Because that's what everybody's there for. It's an ecosystem.
Yep.
Another good question here. This is from Katie. Katie, thanks for the question. What are the differentiators you are using for MQL versus SQLs? And are you making these leads as MQLs, SQLs on the show floor in the lead app? I like this question because I think it is, when is this stuff happening, right? Like
Yeah.
when is the information, because it has to flow for the back half of the show. So I think it's a great question for some.
To keep it without getting too in the weeds, it's hot and cold. It's then dependent on, that might be it. You have your unit, you scan that person, you enter it in the notes. If you don't enter in notes, this is where I come and smack the hands of the sellers and say, enter the information. When we get the information post-event, go through that, clean it up, that's just a terminology that the sellers have, right? So the hot lead equals market qualified lead. We don't in on-site have, okay, this is a sales qualified opportunity. It might be, but to Joe's earlier comment, we need to go through that bank qualification, right? What the sales team will harp on me all the time, 90% of the time, is good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out, or they're having to spend time to review it, clean it up, or they're not able to act on 20 leads because they're full-time job and this part-time job with the event. So to summarize, put a bow on it, we start with hot and cold, and then based off of the review with the seller post-event, this is where we'll go through and say, okay, there's notes. Here's what we want to follow up on. All of these hot leads from the event are now considered market qualified leads. Then as they progress in your CRM, this is where marketing and sales kind of the handoff, the baton. They will then have to go and update that. So the seller, they're going to have to move that along in Dynamics or Salesforce from market qualified lead to a sales accepted lead, or then sales qualified opportunity.
Nice. Great breakdown. You got anything on that, Joe? Or you want me to keep moving?
One quick thing, and it
Yeah,
pulls it all
fire.
together on the lead conversation. You can have the best tools, the best lead retrieval system, but at the end of the day, it comes down to human behavior. If your booth staff is not doing it, they're not trained, they don't understand the importance, it's all going to fall apart anyway. So, and I think booth staff training
Yeah, I love that.
around lead qualification, lead collection, lead scoring is probably the most important element of any part of lead collection. And it's reminding your reps in the booth, salespeople, whomever, that look, yeah, that person may be your customer and you may know them for 10 years, but just scan their badge anyway, because that's an important touch point in the journey, in the CRM, in your marketing automation. It's such a critical point.
I think that's good hammer home on that, Joe. That was nice because I think it's the
That's a separate
behavior.
That's another podcast.
It's a whole, yeah, it's I want to start talking about behavior in the booths and having a plan and making sure everybody's on the plan, but let's keep
Yeah.
rolling. Last question that we're going to do right now, and then we're going to roll to the back half of this. It is from our very own friend, Greg Beach here. I guess I have to say go Eagles for Greg. I don't know how I'm going to root for the Eagles, but I think I am. I don't know. I hate saying it, but I think I might have to. Greg is a good question. Greg said, can you speak to the handoff from event marketing measurement to sales? Do you have an agreement on this with sales leadership? It's a great question. I love it because I've always encouraged people that we work with and we talk to. It's like, who is your advocate in sales? Who is your partner in sales? Who do you have to drive home the strategy, whether it's what's being handed off, the way that it's being followed up on, the questions that are coming back in return? So I would say, John and Joe, during your process of what you all have been doing, can you speak on the handoff and what that looks like and any advice for people?
So it's 2 points. First one, so the measurement per se, what we're doing with Joe comes down to exit booth surveys, post-event surveys. It depends on who the audience is. So I might refine and get the feedback from the measurement and highlight that to the sales leader. Hey, here's who the audience was. Here's the breakdowns. Here's the feedback, the post-event survey, continuation of that. We will use that to influence future events, right? We did this with a roadshow, 13 global cities that we did. Each event, we had a post-event survey. We had 5 questions, framework for all of them was the same, but it allowed us to uncover things that are working and things that aren't, gave us who our target audience was, were they showing up. So we used that to help influence future events or to justify the strategy that we're doing. Second point, the handoff with sales, that's determined in the pre-planning, right? So we have sellers that are involved in all of our weekly event syncs, and as we're gearing up for an event, so that they can feel empowered and involved. And then by the time that we get to the post event, we're not scrambling, because a lot of the work happens pre, not necessarily post. So having that alignment with sales in the pre allows us to then, once the event is done, we regroup with them, go through everything, make sure they're clear on next steps, hand that over to them through your CRM. And then this is where I agree, disagree on who does what, but the event team, us, keeps in contact with that seller to make sure that 30, 60, 90 days, we are still following up. They haven't forgotten me. Here's my email saying, Joe, you're supposed to follow up. You haven't. Here's your reminder. Here's your scorecard. So it's a way for us to keep sales interested, engaged, and then create that sense of accountability post-event.
Awesome.
One,
All right,
and
go ahead, Joe.
one of the KPIs too is looking at business outcomes, because everything's not always about buying, right? It's about, I'm interested in learning more. I'm interested in scheduling a follow-up meeting, and now I'm interested in potentially purchasing within the next X number of months. And that metric alone is so good for the MQL, for the SQL, but it's the ammunition. If sales is saying these leads are no good, and the data is saying 40% of these visitors are actually wanting to take the next step, if they're not nurtured or followed up with, you're leaving money on the table.
Guys, let's get to the back half of your story here. So we talked a little bit about what the prep work looks like, the why, the prep work. Give me what's maybe something, let's talk about the data. What did you track? What were you exactly tracking as you began to execute? What kind of data were you collecting?
So for me, it was brand sentiment, net promoter score, having open-ended questions as far as, did they get help from the seller or the sales team in the booth? Did they resonate with any of the questions that we've predetermined? So the questions may change based off the event and what we're doing, but fundamentally, net promoter score, brand sentiment, resonation with our questions and with the sales team. And this is where the sales team, when they get on site with me, love me and hate me, because I will, at the end of the day, send that to them and saying, guys, girls, you're not performing to what we need you to do. This isn't me blasting you, but this is a reminder that we're here doing a job. Help me help you. That's allowed us to be able to then justify, show a year-over-year change. And then with that post-event survey, same type of call to action and questions, but we might change that 5 questions down to 4 and be more targeted towards what we are focusing on that event. And it allows them, they're incentivized, but they can have that touch point again after the event while they're waiting to hear from us. But Joe, feel free to expand on that.
No, that's
Can you guys
exactly
give us like
right.
an example of a question? Because a lot of that was questions, right? Like you're deploying questions
Yep.
via sales or through surveys. So what's an example of a really good question? What's like the ace up the sleeve? What would be a really good one?
Yeah, there's a couple. And I think, to John's point, there's like the journey. There's who they are, what they did, value of information, the sentiment, net promoter score, and then finally the business outcome. So if you look at like the two that are most important is that sentiment type thing. So we'll ask like message agreement. So rate your level of agreement with like Lenovo software and solution services and solutions helps my company with digital workplace or advance our digital transformation or whatever, because that's what all the demos, and that's like the story of the experience, whether it's a session or booth demos, whatever. So there's those agreement type with sentiment, as John mentioned, that promoter score. And then like the business outcomes. What are you most interested in? What are you planning to buy? And what are you planning to do next as a result?
Yeah.
Those 3 or 4 questions out of say 15 are the ones that bubble up. Now, the cool thing about it is you use the other questions then to do like segmentation analysis to say, okay, people under 30 or customers versus non-customers or executives versus people more in the trenches. How did they feel about those? So as they're starting to create the content, the conversations, the booth staff training, when they're qualifying people, they can then curate and tailor the conversation to the sweet spot of that kind of profile of visitor, because everyone's not the same.
And
see
again,
here in the
that's a conversation that we're having with the teams, right? So as we're going to these events, we have the questions that we've determined and developed. If we need to change that based off the business objectives, that's what we're doing in real time. So as you're evaluating and developing, that's a conversation you can have with your sales leader or the business function to determine what's important for us to evaluate. And so what we had developed is the questions that are important to the brand sentiment or the net promoter score.
I see here in the chat, I just want to touch on this because I'm reading it. It says from Bethany saying, we have a challenge because our sales cycle is longer, right?
Mhm.
And then Aaron responded, said, us too. By the time we implement the strategy, we move on to a new sales cycle. What I would urge both of you to think is like essentially that events are a catalyst in that game that you're playing, right? So understand that it won't be as transactional as maybe some have the opportunity to be on the floor. So if you're having events throughout the year, you have to view them as a major touch point, right? Because I would argue that the demo that your rep does online has less impact than the demo that you do on the floor, or that the dinner that person shows up to where you sit next to him for an hour and a half and you talk. So I would leverage that idea of the event being a touch point, logging that touch point, putting notes in on that touch point, and then trying to find trends with those accounts over a long period of a cycle about where the events are contributing. Guys, give me one of the challenges throughout this process. Where did you get challenged? Where did you stumble? Where did you maybe catch something that was unexpected?
I can refer to one, but yeah, you go. You're
John,
clear.
if Joe was the problem, just blink twice.
I'm my own problem.
Just blink.
Yeah.
It was not having a measurement process. Again, we developed a strategy from nothing. I've been with Lenovo for 3 years. I came in to effectively build a strategy, process, lead generation. We started from the ground up. So the challenge that we had was not knowing our audience. And so putting a plan in place that we've implemented. Joe is helping within Lenovo as a whole too, right? So we have a center of excellence where what we've started has been the catalyst from what other businesses can do. And we did this at CES back in January or started January. We used a framework that we developed now that other businesses can latch on. So it was not having any rigor or process to then having that and being able to use the measurement to influence, like I said, other events or going back to senior leadership and saying, okay, the data speaks for what we're doing, not only from a lead generation, but here's what we're seeing for the go-to-market strategy.
John, is it accurate to say that when you're talking about not having a measurement process and then not knowing your audience per se, that's one thing you're trying to measure? Because I think when people hear measure, they think that you're just measuring results, but you're actually trying to measure and gain data
Yep.
on that audience to have clarity of it, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, moving right along. Give me, what were some adjustments that maybe you made, John, on the fly as you started gaining intel, data, better view of the audience, being at the right shows, getting brand sentiment, net promoter score, open-ended questions? What are some adjustments that you made?
So we evaluated competitors where they're at, right? So that was one of the things, both on site, so doing mystery shopping again, working with Joe and the team to go around and act as our competitive intelligence and see if our main competitors are there. Let's unearth and see what they're doing. And so that's allowed us to shift the strategy to be able to say, okay, we see that our top competitors aren't at these shows. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? If it's a good thing, let's continue on. If it's a bad thing, where are they going? That's been able for us to be able to review and evaluate the data.
Nice. Love that. Joe, anything from your side, maybe when you're seeing data, recommendations that maybe you're making? I'm always interested from our side of helping our clients with strategy, engagement, design,
Yeah.
the experience creation, right? I'm always curious that when we can get hands-on data and we are talking to people that have a good handle on their customers and what's going on, what do these adjustments look like?
Yeah, there's two that really pop. One is, and I think most people here visiting this webinar today can relate to this, going back to the booth staff, right? We do end of day reports with recommendations on how to improve if need be. We literally will do morning meetings on the second day based on the first day's data to say, hey, staff, you're not engaging. Only 50% of your visitors said that they were greeted or that someone engaged with them. That should be 75%. So then we
Yeah.
do a little like quick boot staff training reminder in the morning and literally see the numbers pop, which then influences net promoter score and some of the other KPIs, because the more engagement there is, the more success there is. That's why we do face-to-face marketing. From an event design perspective, literally something popped. This wasn't with John, but this was another company once. Pretty good sized booth, a lot of activations going on in the booth. There was this one activation that was like amazing on paper, but in reality, it wasn't working out right. And that was because the message that the brand ambassadors were using at that one demo in the booth, it wasn't resonating with the visitors. So we figured out what they should say, what they could say to make it more interesting, more engaging based upon the survey data showed what they were interested in, what their challenges were. So day 2, day 3, they changed the message, they tweaked it, they got a little more aggressive in getting out the point of it versus that it's fun. And the scores were phenomenally significantly different by day 2, by day 3. So you can
That's
really make
awesome.
some good changes on the fly. I mean, yeah, you can't redesign the booth, but you can make the booth more effective if need be.
Sorry, I got ink. I got a pen exploding here, and I got a white shirt on, so you just never know. I'm trying to be cautious of my arm movements. John, what would you? It costs money to work with Joe. I know Joe likes you, right? But like it costs money. So for somebody that's listening to this call that's in your seat or a similar seat, and maybe they don't have the clearance or the funding, or they can't push through to go work with somebody like Joe or get some consulting or whatever it may be, what kind of, having gone through the process, what kind of recommendations would you have with them of what they could deploy on their own, keeping it simple, but moving the ball down the field and getting closer to where you know that they need to be?
I think AI has come a long way. And I think to Joe's earlier comment, you have resources to develop prompts that can really say, okay, I'm an event strategist, marketer doing X, Y, and Z, trying to solve this need. I'm not saying that we need to get rid of Joe or keep Joe out of business, but
Yeah.
there's things that we
By
can
the end of
do.
this call, we will shut down Joe's business. Yes, this is great. That's why we're here.
No, I think there's tools that are disposable if you take the time, if go on ChatGPT and say, these are the things that I'm trying to solve. Joe mentioned it, not me. I can go on and say, here's the criteria for things that I'm looking to do. I want to know where my competitor is. That's a starting point one. Starting point two is having the conversation with the show organizers to see, does this meet my target audience? Does this meet my budget? What are the things that I can get to take back and to provide a summary to senior leadership on, here is by being here what we win, or by not being here what we lose. So those are the two things that I found to be successful. And then acting or working with Joe as more of that consultant on, here's what we want to do to measure. Should the funds be available on those critical events? We're not doing every event that has measurement. We're trying to be
Yeah.
strategic and make sure that, okay, the big flagship events or the big moments, here's where we're going to really go big and evaluate, so that at the end of the day, we have the data to lead with. We have the year over year information to quantify what we do, because events are the first on the chopping block that can go.
What about from some of the, I really find a ton of value, and we at Rockway, we have these conversations, I would say more qualitatively, just to get our customers thinking and extract from them so we can then work. But a lot of the front end work that you all were doing about the customers and who they are they at the show, and is there anything that maybe you think some event marketers are missing steps there? Because I definitely do. And I definitely think there's simple steps that people can take on their own to just be thinking a little more clearly in that space about their customer, why the customer's there, who that customer truly is, and then formulating a plan to engage them the right way.
I think that was the conversation why we brought in Joe, right? It was the discussion on, okay, where are we seeing success? Where are we needing to improve? Developing those KPIs, developing the portfolio analysis, so that we're armed as leaders to make that education and have that. So I think that's where Joe and the team really came in to help us, because yes, we have our day job and we have a 37 event strategy that we're doing globally. We need experts like Joe, like our agencies, to help guide us so that we can continue doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
but Joe and his team are the subject matter experts.
Love
Yeah,
that.
we look at it like if you're spending more than 5% of your event budget on measurement, you're overspending on measurement. It's literally 5% for our clients that tell us how much they're investing in measurement. Whether it's a small program or large, it's not a one size fits all. There's so many solutions. We come in and we just teach people how to measure. We don't have to do it. Like that's the beauty
Yeah.
of it.
Hey, teach them how to fish. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Eat for life. So that's it. And Mandy and Cody, love you back.
Nice. Guys, I try to keep it to an hour, drive as much value as we can. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got stuff going on. You two are both very busy men. Very grateful to call you both friends and to have you on this show and talk about this stuff. There was some incredible nuggets. I think we really just some great statements made and great explanations. Working through both of your story today was really a lot of fun. So I appreciate you doing it for sure.
Thanks for having us.
Of course, everybody who attended, thank you all so much. I don't know the next show because I don't know. I'm an
Next
idiot.
week, February
I
5th.
should. Thanks, Cody. I should be more prepared.
I mean, you and I were doing a part 2 from our discussions earlier this month
Great.
on event success and design.
We had a big crowd today. I think we touched close to 40, which is awesome. The chat was fantastic. I see a lot of people exchanging information, ideas, problems. That's really what we're here for, on top of delivering relevant and executable topics and information. So thanks everybody who showed up. Looking forward to seeing you next week because we have a show next week, right? Wednesday, it'll be at 1 o'clock on the 5th. Guys, thanks. And thank everybody attending. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
Everyone, thank you.
Yep.
Sure.